The Surface Book 3 is here. Let's unbox it. Microsoft's brand new premium, high-end, super expensive Surface Book 3 is here. And while it's not for everybody, for those that need maximum amount of performance, this is your device. And before we talk any more about it, let's get it out of the box. Now, Microsoft shipped this to me for review, and I believe that this is how they are going to ship commercial customer devices, because that is typical how they do it. I don't believe everybody's going to get the brown box, but pulling back that lid, you can see it here in a nice white protective covering, keeping everything nice and clean and fingerprint free and dust and everything else off here. Surface Book 3 is pretty much an internal refresh. The ports and everything else are looking just about nearly identical. It's got that classic Surface Book design, that teardrop shape. Love it or hate it, it is back again here for another revision. And open up this lid here and you can see, watch how quickly I just get logged in there. I'll explain that in a second. And under there you can see a nice little picture of what the device is. Obviously the keyboard or the display pops off, and underneath that we have the little instruction book that is included with every little Surface device. And so also inside is a power adapter. And if you're not familiar with this power adapter, it is much bigger than some of the other Surface devices because this thing is a beast. It can draw a lot of power. It can output a lot of frames. It is, there's just more current, and it'll allow you to charge faster and maintain that charge even while in heavy load. There was some issue with the Surface Book 2, but Microsoft has rectified that issue this time around. Now in the video, you might have noticed that things may not look as pristine as a brand new out-of-box experience might, expect, especially because that was I believe the commercial boxing. Full transparency, I had to open it prior to doing all this because the box from the delivery person looked a little beat up, and I wanted to make sure this thing wasn't all crumbled up inside, and so I got it out, got it open, and got it set up. You also saw really quickly in that video how fast the facial recognition features worked with Windows Hello. I mean, I opened the lid and I was already logged in. That is the type of performance that you can expect on this type of a device. It's a good piece of hardware. It's the high end, and this specific one is the 15-inch variety. There is also a 13.5-inch little brother to this device, and this one has the Core i7 32 gigs of RAM, 512 gigabytes of storage, and the NVIDIA 1660 Ti. You can spec it up to a Quadro RTX 3000 if you want to, but this particular configuration costs $27.99, and that is what Microsoft sent over for me to review and make this video for you all to see. Now, when comparing it to this guy, which is the Surface Book 2, you really can't tell a difference. I mean, I'm using it right now to project up behind me. I'm really starting to get used to and getting this into my workflow and using it every day for a proper review. But you realistically, from a physical appearance perspective, will not be able to tell this from a Surface Book 2. Surface Book 2 and 3 look identical. It's the internals with the Intel 10th generation chips and NVIDIA 16 series GPUs that make the difference in the performance. That is the biggest difference here, not the exterior, it's the performance. And yes, of course, that teardrop shape is sticking around. Some people love it, some people hate it. I personally don't mind it. I've been using a Surface Book since the very first generation, and I've never really had an issue with things getting in the crack. People were concerned that, hey, what if you had a pencil in there and you slammed it shut and it broke the screen? Well, that's going to break a screen on a regular laptop anyways. I have yet to have a problem in multiple years of ownership of a Surface Book of having that actually really be an issue. So to me, it's a non-issue. Whether or not you like the design, that's up to you. I like it just because it gives it's just not plain and generic. It gives, you can tell a Surface Book from a mile away if it's a Surface Book. It's got that shape. I like it, whatever. Moving on, everything else is the same. Keyboard still has that really good feel to it. I really like the keyboards on these things. The trackpad is sizable, maybe a little smaller now compared to some of the more modern devices. And yes, there are bezels on the display. It is not like a Surface Pro X or anything like that. And also, speaking of the display, it pops off. You press the button and it comes off, and you have this thing, which is great, which they call the Clipboard. And then you can just walk around and do your little doodle dabbing and do whatever you got to do with this type of a setup. It's just a nice little benefit. It's an extra usage case scenario. I don't personally use it a lot in this type of environment, but you know what? Having the option always a good thing. I can't imagine anybody would be upset by that. And Microsoft has done a really good job of perfecting the hinge setup mechanism between Windows and the hardware itself. There were some big issues with the first generation stuff, but we're multiple years past that. And overall, it works pretty well now. I haven't had too many major issues on the Surface Book 2. Surface Book 3, I would expect it's just even better. And so far, in my very limited time, it has done a pretty good job. Now, obviously, this thing is not cheap. It starts at around $1,500 and just scales on up there. And you can probably spend just about anything you want on a Surface Book 3 above that $1,500 price tag. That being said, this device is not for everybody. If you need just a laptop to get work done, go get a Surface laptop, get a Surface Pro, get a Pro X. Those are the devices that are going to be for you. If you are doing photo editing, if you're doing video editing, if you're doing AI and ML computation, this is the machine that you should be looking at. This is a workstation class piece of hardware. It is not your Excel warrior machine. It's not your Word doc machine. It is for somebody who needs more muscle behind so that they can get work done in a mobile form factor. Keep in mind, this is a laptop with an i7 and a 1660 Ti. It is on the higher end of the SKU of what you can get in a laptop these days. Surprisingly, not an i9 option. That would have been, the ultimate workstation class device, realistically, an i9 with a Quadro, but Microsoft chose not to do that. And of course, there is no Thunderbolt port on here either. So if you've been looking for a Thunderbolt class device, this is not it. It does have a couple USB-C ports, but they are just USB-C. I strongly believe that we will effectively see Thunderbolt technology included, but possibly the next generation when we see USB 4 starting to make the rounds in newer devices. But for now, you're not going to get that in the Surface Book. That is potentially the biggest downside. Now, they do have a wide variety of docks. They've got a mobile dock and they've got the Surface Dock 2 that will give you a significant amount of functionality that should make up for the lack of Thunderbolt. So keep that in mind that you might want to price in a Surface Dock 2 if you are planning to buy this hardware. All that being said, in my very limited time with it, it's good. It's exactly like what you would expect going from a 2 to a 3. One thing to keep in mind, if you are getting the power brick, or if you have other Surface devices, the power brick that comes with this thing is hefty. I mean, you could use this thing as a club, you could twirl it around and whack someone in the head, and it would really hurt. This thing is quite a bit thicker in the cable and in the power supply because it draws a lot more power for that performance. There were actually some issues very early on with the Surface Book 2 that if you were maxing it at capacity for gaming or whatever computation and you had it plugged in, it would actually still drain the battery. Microsoft has resolved that issue with the Surface Book 3. And so make sure you've got the right power adapter use with your Surface Book because it does make a difference. It will work with the older style. Don't get me wrong. If you have them lying around the house, plug it in, it'll charge this baby up. But it will not charge it as fast or be able to maintain capacity if you are under some serious load. So keep that in mind if you're planning to outfit these things out. Around the office, that is. Outfit these things out around the office. Anyways, so that is a really brief look at the Surface Book 3. I'm going to have a full review here in maybe a week to 10 days, something like that. I need to kind of dig around. I need to run some benchmarks on this. I need to just use it just to make sure that there's nothing really kind of creeping up on it. But overall, I'm expecting it to be a pretty good device, basically because it's a Surface Book 2, which I really liked and honestly used just about every single day for over a year and a half, 2 years, maybe almost. But it's a Surface Book 3, so it's the same thing, but faster. How can that be good? Hit the subscribe button, and we'll catch all of you right back here next time.